This is the Roaring Meg waterfall, and it's just below Cooktown, right in the heart of the rainforest country. You can tell why it's called the Roaring Meg. And in wet season time, when it's in full swing, all this rock surface is covered with water, and it races away, and it drops about 3,000 feet. That's about 1,000 metres in funny talk, right down to the coastline. Way back in the olden days, early 20s and that period, when the first original tin scratchers and tin miners came up here, they used this water and the runoff from it to wash their tin. They dig channels all the way around the mountainside and use and channel the water to wash out the tin.
The early tin miners who came into this scrub country were looking for riches. Life would have been pretty unpleasant when they lived here. It was wet all the time, and of course they had this great big canopy which cut out most of the sunlight. The Aboriginals, on the other hand, had come to grips with this environment. They knew by looking around the place what they could find to get themselves the food that they needed and of course the water that they needed. That's quite a contrast to what those early tin miners found. They were quite out of their element and out of their depth, but even today, when we go back into the scrub, we can find the remains of their occupation in that country.
I reckon these tin scratcher blokes that were up here, they would have had to cart all this sort of stuff from Bloomfield. They probably carted it on their backs or maybe even used pack horses. Also had to cart all their food. But they probably didn't realise that, there we go, right outside their front door, they had these little rainforest figs growing, and you can eat them, they're edible. They did make some attempt to grow local foods, and always around tin huts like this, you're likely to find banana bushes, and there's one over there with bananas on it. Pretty scruffy looking one, but it's worthwhile. Apart from banana bushes, you'll also find chilies. Look at these little fellas. They use the chilies to chuck into the stew, just to flavour the meat a bit. And they really have a bit of a bite to them. They're hot. I reckon they'd keep you regular though.
You get a real idea of how tough the life was for those early miners when you look around a clearing like this. All of the scrub that once grew here had to be cut away, and all of that work was done by hand.
Looking around the place, I can't see any other food trees around the joint. What I can see are these gullies here. And these gullies carried the water for the tin miners from the Roaring Meg way back in the scrub line, maybe 2 or 3 kilometres. You've got to be a bit careful because the ferns that are growing out of them disguise the depth. And when you get down to gullies like this one here, this is the master gully. It looks, oh crikey, you'd lose yourself down there. Looks to be about 5 foot deep. Hang on. And it is. Crikey. It's just full of ferns and weeds. And I would have hate to have had to work to dig it out. It's only about 1 foot wide and very cramped. Hello. Somebody else has been in here.
That's a python skin. Obviously shedding his skin down here. There's a bit more of it. I think I better get out of here. This is the northern edge of what was once called the Big Scrub. Now, it was called the Big Scrub because it went all the way back south, about 450 kilometres, right back as far as Townsville. These days, it's broken up into pockets, and that's occurred because of farming and settlement. This trip will take me almost to the very top of Cape York Peninsula, looking for bush tucker. Of course, to survive in any environment, you need more than food. You've also got to have water and, of course, shelter. But water around here in a rainforest environment is not really very difficult to find. In fact, during the wet season, I wouldn't be able to drive through here because all of these creeks would be running a banker. Way back in the beginning, when I first started to research bush tucker, I started in this environment, the rainforest. And the reason for that was the fact that I was most familiar with this sort of country. When I was a bit of a kid, I grew up to the south of here, in rainforest country, so I knew all about it. Well, I thought I did at the time anyway. A few years later, that background and that information held me in good stead, because the army sent me off to Vietnam. Looking at bush tucker in an environment like this is not as difficult as you might imagine, because once you look around a bit and look into the forest instead of at it, there's tucker everywhere.